Hi, I'm Bob, and welcome to Between the Sheets, where we look at Microsoft Excel and related technologies. To be proficient in Excel and get your work done with the least amount of struggle, you want to know quick shortcuts to select cells. You might know some of the shortcuts here, but there might be some you don't know. And I'm going to show you how to do everything in both the Windows and Mac editions. So let's take a look and see how it works. What's most important to know is that selecting cells works mostly the same way as navigating through a worksheet. The difference is you add the Shift key. Let's start simply. If I press the 4 arrow keys on the keyboard, so I could go up, down, left, right, no big deal. If I hold the Shift key down as I do it, so if I hold the Shift key down and hit the up arrow, I can select up. If I hold the Shift key down and hit the down arrow, I can select down, or do the same thing going to the left or going to the right. If I've selected too much, I keep my finger down on the Shift key. I keep holding the Shift key down, and I just tap the arrow key in the opposite direction. Let's look at rows of data. So in Windows, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on column A of one of these rows. If I want to zip out to the end, I can press Control right arrow. If I want to zip back to column A, Control left arrow. But now let's add the Shift key. If I hold the Shift key down now, and I'm going to press Control Shift right arrow, that selects to the end. So click over there. If I'm at the last cell there and I want to select back to the beginning, back to column A, instead of just pressing Control left arrow by itself, I press Control Shift left arrow. Now, if you're on the Mac, you just use the Command key instead of the Control key. Also in Windows, just to make things a little more confusing, you could also press Control End or Control Home. Either of those will work as the same as doing the right arrow or the left arrow. There is no Home key or End key on the Mac, so obviously that won't work there. Dealing with columns is the same thing. So let's say I'm right there somewhere in column B. Control down arrow or Command down arrow on the Mac brings me to the bottom. Control up arrow or Command up arrow on the Mac brings me to the top. If I want to select, if I press Control Shift down arrow, that selects to the bottom, or on the Mac that would be Command Shift down arrow. If I'm at the bottom and I want to select to the top, I press Control Shift up arrow or Command Shift up arrow on the Mac. One cool feature a lot of people, even advanced Excel users, don't know about is the name box. So you see the last used cell in this worksheet is G29. There are several ways that I could select down to G29, but let's say maybe I'm over on that first number there. So that's cell B5. Right, and there's the name box. Something that even a lot of advanced Excel users don't know is you could click on that name box, highlight it, type G29, press enter, and boom, you zip all the way there. Let's go back up here. Well, you could use the Shift key with that as well. So starting from that same first number there, if I click here, make that G29, instead of hitting the enter key by itself, if I press Shift enter, I've selected down to that cell. So that's a great technique when you want to go and select or just move across a very large worksheet and scrolling is too difficult. Now on the Mac version of Excel does have that name box, but selection does not work. You could go and use this name box to navigate to another cell in the worksheet on the Mac edition, but the Mac edition will not select when you use the Shift key. And I've tried all kinds of every key combination I could possibly do, Command, Option, Function, all that. None of that works. It just, for whatever reason, that is not built into the Mac. Now let's talk about selecting cells with the mouse and keyboard together. So if I want to select multiple ranges of cells, let's say I just want to select these numbers and I want to select maybe the same cells going down March, what I do is on the Windows edition, I hold the Control key down as I drag. If I'm on the Mac, I hold the Command key down. And I could do that to select cells that are not contiguous. We're going to come back to that concept in a minute. But first, if I want to select an entire column, of course, I could click the column header. If I want to select an entire row, I can click the row header. There are keyboard shortcuts as equivalents. If you want to select an entire column, then you press Control Spacebar. If you want to select an entire row, you can press Shift Spacebar. Those are exactly identical on the Mac. And they have to be identical because you probably know, if you're a Mac user, that pressing Command Spacebar opens Spotlight. So it has to be Control Spacebar and not Command Spacebar. Now, what if you want to select several columns at once or several rows at once? So there's a few ways to do this. Let's look at columns first. If I want to select a range of columns, of course, I could put my mouse pointer on the column header and just drag across to select. No big deal. I could do the same for rows, put my mouse pointer on the header and drag straight down, and I could select a bunch of rows. Now, that's fine when you're only selecting a handful of columns or a handful of rows. But let's say you have thousands of columns or thousands of rows that you want to select. It gets kind of difficult if you want to drag. So what you can do is, let's say if I want to select B through G, I click the header for column B and I hold the Shift key down. And with the Shift key down, I click the header for column G and the whole range gets selected. It's also the Shift key on the Mac, no difference. The same for rows. I can click the header for row 5 to select that entire row, hold the Shift key down, and Shift click the header for row 10, and all of those get selected. But what if I wanted to select not column B through G? What if I just wanted to cherry pick B and G? For that, I use the Control key. So I select that column there, that column B. In Windows, I hold down the Control key. On the Mac, I hold down the Command key. And now I can select just those two. And the same for rows. If I want row 5 and 10, not through 10, I click the header for row 5. And now in Windows, I hold down the Control key. And with the Control key down, I click the header for row 10. On the Mac, I'm going to hold down the Command key. Now, what if I wanted to select everything? There's a couple of ways to do that, and it also kind of depends on your definition of everything. Excel has an object it calls the current region. Let me zoom out here a little bit. So the current region is an area where you have filled cells bordering on other filled cells. On this sheet, it's pretty clear. We have this whole big data block there, and it's surrounded by a blank row on top, a blank row on bottom, a blank column to the right. Now, the word all begins with the letter A. So when I'm clicked somewhere inside that current region and I press Control A or Command A on the Mac, I select that entire current region. So you see it selects until it finds blank rows and blank columns. Now, if I press Control A or Command A a second time, now it selects all 16.7 million cells on the worksheet. Now, what if I'm out here? If I'm over there, I'm in a blank cell surrounded by a bunch of blank cells. Well, there is no current region. So now if I press Control A in Windows or Command A on the Mac, I immediately select all 16.7 million cells. Also, I could zoom back in here now, is you see to the left of column A and above row 1 is this little blank box that has a tiny little triangle on it. When you click that, that immediately selects all the cells on this worksheet and completely ignores if there is a current region. That gray box exists on the Windows and Mac editions and the online edition as well. I've been using many of these techniques for years. They reduce a lot of the fighting I have to do with the software. So until next time, my name is Bob, and this has been Between the Sheets.